And now it's time for the Wild Side News with your host, Sydney Wildsmith.
Welcome to the Wild Side News. Coming up, 7 killer whales gone missing. Civil war in the Congo puts last mountain gorillas in peril. Mammals face dire futures. These top stories and more on the premiere edition of the Wild Side News. Top story. 7 of Puget Sound's killer whale population have not returned and are presumed dead in what scientists fear is the worst sudden decline in more than a decade. Following a hard-fought struggle, the orcas of Puget Sound had reached a total population of 90 in 2005. In the previous century, numbers had maintained at around 140 individuals. With this recent loss, including the 100-year-old leader and 2 young females that have bore calves in recent years, the numbers now have declined to only 83. The precise cause of their disappearance is uncertain, but declining Chinook salmon populations are having an impact on the health of the orcas. Stresses from tour boats and naval underwater sonar testing are also high on the list of possible causes. Researchers have noted that the whales are traveling longer distances, perhaps in the attempt to find adequate food supplies. The orcas of Puget Sound are treasured by thousands of adults and children who watch their antics from the shore. With the election now 1 week off, Dirk Kempthorne's Department of the Interior is working overtime trying to read and review the remaining 200,000 public responses of the over 300,000 submitted in the last 60 days. Trouble is, they have less than 30 hours to do so. Kempthorne has enlisted 15 employees to devote full time to this effort, which comes down to reviewing 7 comments a minute. When done, the Interior will draft changes to rules that protect endangered species, which will include greenhouse gas considerations and eliminate the analysis by federal biologists on decisions to approve or regulate dams, power stations, and other federal projects. This is politics as usual for the Bush administration, which relies on such rule changes to ease protective regulations. The current rush to review will finish, and then the changes can be put in place before the current November 1st deadline expires. A change in administration permits the incoming president to put a hold on pending rule changes. It is much more difficult to change existing rules, as the entire review process must be reinstituted. Democratic presidential candidate Barack Obama has said he will reverse the proposals, while Republican candidate John McCain does not really have a position on this dramatic protective legislation. Many say this would be the most significant rewrite of endangered species regulations in 20 years. The civil war in the Congo is raging again, between the Tutsi rebels and the government troops allied with the Hutsi tribes. Caught up in the mayhem are 200 of the last 700 mountain gorillas on Earth, as Tutsi rebels have overtaken the headquarters of Virunga National Park. Virunga was the site of the recent murder of several gorillas. As a result of the fighting, all rangers from the park whose job it was to protect the gorillas from poachers and danger have fled, leaving the gorillas completely at the mercy of the warring forces. In the past, these wars have been dramatically brutal. Conservationists as well have fled the area for fear of losing their lives and therefore have no way of knowing the fate of these remnant members of the mountain gorilla societies. Congolese troops appear to be in retreat and heading to the regional capital of Goma. The situation is dire and the fate of the mountain gorillas uncertain. It is becoming ever more obvious that vast areas of the planet have gone berserk. We can hope that as the threat of a deep global economic recession continues, that a remnant of human wisdom may survive. The Earth is headed for a dramatic shift in our lifetimes. Talk of the beginnings of a mass extinction is being borne out as researchers announce that 20% of all mammal species are now facing extinction. The prevailing force continues to be we humans, who are carrying out tropical deforestation, overhunting, and the universal destruction of habitats generally, to meet human needs for food and the resources needed to satisfy the expanding populations. Add to this the dramatic changes caused by current and future climate change, and the trend appears to be unstoppable. A study published by Science magazine finds that 1,141 of the world's 5,487 known mammal species are classified as critically endangered. 188 are in the highest threat category of critically endangered, including the Iberian lynx, the addax, and the Dama gazelle. Large mammals are particularly hard hit due to hunting and poaching, particularly in Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America. Fully 40% of all mammal species are facing the threat of extinction. Perhaps it is time that humans took a few giant steps back, slowed down a bit, and took the time to consider what this really means. If good old Henry Thoreau were still writing from his little shack on Walden Pond, he'd be even more critical of the world around him. While at Walden Pond, Thoreau spent a considerable time recording as many plant species as he could. Today, his job would be 27% easier, because that's the percentage of plant species that he'd identified that are no longer there. Just like other living things, plants migrate to more suitable climates, and that's apparently what is happening as global warming plays itself out. But there are many plants that tend not to move as effectively, and they just seem to disappear. So, say goodbye to buttercups, asters, lilies, mints, orchids, roses, violets at Walden Pond. And speaking of migrating, one of the most effective human activities to help maintain animal diversity as humans cut up larger habitats like forests and grasslands into smaller and smaller parcels with roads and houses is to create or literally construct corridors to connect them. In this way, animals can continue to move throughout large areas connected by these corridors. Conservation International led the way internationally in developing and promoting this concept, along with groups like the Rewilding Institute. But scientists sometimes think a bit too linearly, literally, and recent studies by researcher Matthew Holland of UC Davis and co-author Alan Hastings suggest that corridor advocates think like the animals they serve and put more zigs and zags in their routing. Seems the animals prefer a more meandering journey. Stories about our human ancestors are always fascinating. Studies of human development trace our most ancient civilizations back to 2000, 4000, 6000 BC. Earlier indications of human habitation in North America lead some to say that 20,000 years ago, humans were fashioning hunting points in the Midwest. So when we hear talk of humans knowing how to start and control fires for cooking and warmth 790,000 years ago, it can create a giant sucking sound inside the mind as we try to grasp that astonishing human legacy, that man has contributed to global warming. And speaking of old, Alzheimer's appears to be somewhat less prevalent in people who have become more educated and spent their lives in mentally demanding occupations. So that's some useful information to remember, if you can. And in that vein, here's a little teaser to keep you thinking about the big picture. Advances in deep space imagery are achieving astonishing levels of clarity. So I leave you with this image of NGC 7331, a galaxy not unlike our own, a whopping 50 million light-years away. It is an actual photograph taken by Vincent Percy and Gillis Bergen of the Calar Alto Observatory. And finally, join us each week as we take you around the world of nature and into the realms of wonder on this our planet Earth at WildsideNews.com and on YouTube at Wildside News. This is Sidney Wildsmith saying adios until we meet next time here on the Wildside News.